Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of the Wild in the Whites podcast. So today, I'm here with just Buckley.
Or Andrew. Andrew's.
With Andrew.
Just Buckley, sorry.
And as we talked about at the end of the last episode, it's becoming a little bit, which you weren't even there for, so this is
look at that.
News to you as to what we talked about at the end of that podcast. But we talked a little bit about how it's getting harder and harder for all three of us to get together. So to kind of expect more of this.
Yeah, back and forth.
Yeah.
Especially as we start adding more people to the team, it's going to be even harder to get all of us together.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to stop putting content out there just because all of us can't get together. So we decided to do an episode tonight and just the two of us, and kind of go back to what we talked about in your introductory of how you want to learn some things.
Yeah.
So I figured that as I was doing this just the other day, I was like, this is something that I think it would be beneficial for Buckley to know about.
Mm-hmm.
And it is e-scouting. So utilizing an online platform to look at an area that you have never been before,
mm-hmm.
and figuring out how you would want to, where you would look, how you would explore it, that
right.
kind of thing.
Things to look for.
Expect to find sign that animals are there. So, like I said, this is episode 7. The last one I said it was 7, but we had a 2-part episode for episode 5, so I messed that up. So this is episode 7.
Cool. And
we're doing e-scouting on onX. So a couple things that I want to just start out with this is how I do it, and I completely understand that there are some things that I'm probably going to miss. Some people do things differently. This is what has worked for me so far, to be able to put myself in areas where I find sign, and
mm-hmm.
I can set up game cameras and get pictures of things, and been successful the last couple of years with hunting as well. I also want to preface I'm doing this referencing deer movement,
mm-hmm.
not bears, not turkeys.
Right,
we're doing deer. We're doing deer today. If you can move your phone off the table, that was quite loud when that just buzzed.
I didn't even know it buzzed.
Yeah, I did.
Gotcha.
Oh, and I remember my headphones this time, so I can actually listen and make sure that the audio is okay, because the last one was a little wonky. So we're doing good today, it sounds like, at least.
You would know. You can hear the sounds. All right.
So I'm screen recording this right now.
Cool.
So then everything that I do on here, I can upload onto the video and show you guys at home. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I recommend going to our YouTube channel at Wild in the Whites and watching this video, so you can get the interactive video with this as to what I'm doing. Okay, so instead of me picking apart someplace that I have been before,
mm-hmm.
While you were doing other stuff around, I jumped online and I went up into northern Maine, and I just grabbed this random spot. And I chose northern Maine because I'm looking at it almost on kind of a parallel line across from where we're at. So it's similar woods topography, some lakes, some probably some swamps, some cutting, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be similar to what we do here in the Whites. But this is my onX account, onX Hunt. And I did not want to put it on the White Mountains because I'm not deleting all my pins so that people don't know where I hunt. And I didn't want to show you where all my pins are. So I think anybody on this listening to this that's a hunter can relate to that. So how I wanted to do this is I am an onX Elite member, but I am going to try first off to not use any of the perks that you get with onX Elite, and I want to just show the basic topography map with the satellite view, and how I would go about picking apart a landscape like this. So we're at Bull Hill and Bald Mountain
Greenlaw
and
Mountain.
then Greenlaw Mountain. So this kind of region through here, you have some mountains. The tallest one is 1,600 feet. So they're between 15 and 1,600 feet. So we're not talking about 4,000 footers. We're not talking about going up 3,000 feet in elevation. They're hills, but they're not crazy. But yet that's gonna help a lot, because topography is a big thing with e-scouting. So all people at home are going to need to start e-scouting, if you've never scouted before, or Andrew, if you have never e-scouted before, you're going to need something with topography. I say that topography lines are the number one thing that you'll need to do it, even above and beyond satellite imagery. But if you can get a platform like the basic package of onX, or like we talked about with Gaia, or Google Maps has topography and satellite imagery, like there's plenty of free platforms out there that you can do it too. But if you want a subscription to something like Gaia or onX to get that, I highly recommend doing that. And I can go into some of the perks of the elite membership with onX too, and show those off a little bit, and you can see how much I utilize some of those. I would say the leaf off imagery, so showing the image of satellite with no leaves on it, is a huge perk that I utilize. But all you really need is topography, and then the basic satellite imagery on top of that is going to help you just a little bit more. And we'll get into that. So this, like I said, it's just a random spot in northern Maine that I chose, and I'll try to pick this apart as though I'm going there for the first time, and I'm going to do it from a frame of mind of scouting and not hunting, because how I always do this is I e-scout, and then I put boots on the ground to either confirm or dispel what I have seen on here. So I always e-scout first, and then put boots on the ground, scout, and then go hunt. But this e-scouting could lead you to just hunting if you wanted it to be just hunting, and you might end up into a spot. I've done it plenty of times where I thought it looked great when I'm on this map, but it's really not what I thought it was going to be. And that's why putting boots on the ground is so helpful, because you never quite know what you're getting into. So now that we're going to say that I'm visiting this area, and then I'm going to go
visiting this area.
go scout, and I'm going to put some boots on the ground, and I want to know where to start, because covering this whole area is going to take several days. But if I e-scout, I might be able to pinpoint some areas where those bucks may be lying, where those, or we're going to go for deer, so I can kind of show you where I think the does will be and where the bucks will be. And so this is what I'm doing. I'm going to hone in on certain areas. So I see, and I'm going to try to use the cursor as much as possible. If I stop doing that, can you call me on
Absolutely.
that? Okay. So I see a high point here, okay? And then I see a high point here, and I see a high point over here. And obviously we have some topography in and around this regions, okay? What I like is in between these two high points, I want to look at this a little bit closely, because that's a pretty wide range one. And then I see like another little dip here, and then through here, this region, there's a lot of ups and downs. And I can zoom in a little bit, and we can see we also have kind of slow internet here. My computer's acting slow, so I apologize if this is how this goes. But okay, so it's loading. You see how through here you can tell that there's kind of a valley, little pinch point. Okay, when I'm going to go super basic. Okay, so when people are talking about pinch points, they're talking about natural land features more often than not, okay? So when you see 2 high points and a low point in between them, like a saddle, like that is an area that's easier to walk through than the steep areas around it. So that's a path of least resistance that I'd want to focus on. But I'm not going to hit every single, well, I have in the past, but I'm not going to hit every single dip. I'm going to look for ones where there's a really more of a reason why they're going to be going through there, okay? So what I see here is I see some change in color here. I want to know what that is, especially because I see water, which is something that they need, food and water, right?
Possibly swampy.
This looks swampy. This looks real swampy. If we were talking about moose, I bet you'd see some moose sign down in there. But bucks like swamps too. They really do. They like to bed down in swamps, especially once they get pressured and, hunting pressure. You'll start to see them disappear in those swamps. And years where you have a drought, the swamps are going to be the places where there's any moisture left,
right,
and the food's going to be. So you might see a higher population of deer in general down in there and animals in general down there, because that's where the food is for them. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and see what this area is all about. Okay, this I'm already liking. I might actually go hunt here. So you see, this is where I would start to use the leaf off imagery and just give myself an idea of what I'm dealing with for types of trees. But this looks like up here we have a cut. You see those lines in the topography, right? Not the topography lines, but in the satellite imagery.
Right.
And then over here,
okay,
there's even more. And then down here, there's even more. There's some around here. This looks like a log landing to me. That right there looks like a good log landing, and there's some cutting around it. Those cuts, if they're brand new, are paths of least resistance for things to move through. If they're 2, 3, 4 years old, they are full of food.
Right, the little buds and stuff.
Exactly.
We were listening to that guy down at Huntstock talk about that.
Yep.
Okay.
When you're talking about anything from like 2 feet to like 5, 6 feet high, that's like prime food for them to start eating.
Gotcha.
And that's why you'll find a lot of moose sign in there too, because they're going to be going after that food. If those are like 10-year-old cuts, then they're grown up super high, super thick, more than likely if they're just let to grow. And what that can be is an obstacle which creates roots around it, okay? So if you find a cut and you have just really, really, really thick whips through it, check all the way around it, because there may be paths going through it that you can find where they've consistently kind of made a game trail going in and out of it, because still those really thick areas may hold animals, especially bucks that don't want to be seen. They may still go in there, but often you'll find these really what's the word I'm trying to find? Really defined game trails, because they all go one way because it's the true path of least resistance through it, and also look all around it for the sign of them skirting the edges of it, because a lot of the times they won't go through it eventually, and they'll just start skirting all the way around it. So you may find those trails and they kind of just hit the edge and they loop around it, or you'll find all your scat all the way around it and not going into it. But you may also
something like this, you might see them going, instead of going through it, you'd see it go more. If they come to it, they might do something like that.
Yeah.
So almost just to avoid that whole area.
Yeah. This specific one,
I mean, that looks more like a landing, but if that was a clearing.
Right. So I would say more or less with like this, I would be checking these edges up top here, right? And walking my way all the way around those, especially because look at the change in how these trees are versus those. That creates an edge, okay? And deer are creatures of edge. They like to, if they're going to be walking, they're going to follow where there's cover more often than not. And they're not going to put themselves wide out in the open until the middle of the night. So they are going to walk that edge, and they're going to hang out on that edge, and they're going to follow however that edge goes. So I'd walk that whole edge up here, right? This one down here it looking like a landing, I would assume that that's going to stay mostly grass. And if that grass gets really high, then I'd look for beds in it. Just yesterday, I posted a post about my trip that I went out to go check a game camera. I walked through some log landings to get to that area, and I checked for beds through there, and I found one. It wasn't like a major bedding area, but it looked like a moose had laid down just conveniently there.
Right.
But I would check for beds, and if you're out tracking and you come on these landings here and the tracks go through them, depending on how big they are, that's a good spot to pause and wait and see and look on the other side of those to see if anything's looking back at you, because often they'll hang out on the edges of those too. Gotcha. Again, being those creatures at edge. But again, like say I'm tracking through here and I come up on the edge of a cut. This is getting into a whole different topic than e-scouting, but that's where I would pause too and start looking out into that cut before I walk right out into it.
You might say
if it's open.
Different topic than e-scouting, but we're literally e-scouting this land right now.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Right. So this swamp,
and I'm learning.
This swamp through here, again, that could be food, that could be bedding cover, there could be a lot of things in here. So the fact that there's some kind of water, wetland right in here on the edge of a cut, so they could have food and then they could have their bedding right there. Dude, that's sweet. That gets me excited. Okay, so that's a reason why they're going to be there. So
and you've got it on both sides.
Yes.
If I'm reading this right, because you've got this cut and that cut,
yes.
and you've got... Interesting.
Yeah. So that is going back to what I just said a couple minutes ago. I want to find areas where there's a reason for them to be there besides these pinch points. So I want to identify those pinch points, and I like to do that while I've got the image kind of wider. And now that I'm zooming in, I'm trying to find the reasons why they're going to be in specific spots, right?
Now, I could be completely off base here.
Okay.
But the other day we were talking about how during the day they tend to go up into the hills.
Sometimes, yeah.
And then during the night they'll come down.
Sometimes, yeah.
They move, right?
Yep.
So if you've got higher elevation,
yeah,
this whole spot is looking more promising.
It is, yeah. And so say that, well, now I'm going to just kind of broaden my horizons a little bit. So they do often, you'll find that like the more really mature bucks are going to go up in elevation and they're going to hang up higher and they're going to bed where they can have that advantage of being way up high. But that being said, I've seen plenty of big mature bucks, and again, going back to like hunting pressure. So if you're out there and there's a lot of hunters in this area, they may dip down and hide in that really, really thick swamp to get away from people. But also, there's just swamp bucks out there that just want to hang out in swamps, and that's where they live the majority of their life, and they don't really go up high. But there's a time of year where all bucks start to move around, and that's the rut. Okay, so if I'm looking for a track, so I'm e-scouting now to go in and scout and confirm what I've seen, but now if I'm going to go hunt this, or if I don't have time to scout this and I want to live scout it with a gun in my hand, I'm going to try to find their paths of least resistance. So if that buck's living in here because he's got everything that he needs, and now he wants to start roaming around, where am I going to go look for that? So I'll zoom out just a little bit again. So we've determined this could be a good living area. But what's out over this way? What's out over this way? What's out over this way? The reason why I'm saying that is look at these high points, right? Up here, over here, over here. And then look at these saddles that go in between them. Now this is a really defined pinch point right here that really could funnel something really small, versus over here it's much wider. Okay, over here much wider. So I'd be a little bit more interested in this one to see if it's really a defined one that is more traveled, and I'd expect to find rubs through there, because when they're rutting and they're moving around and they're laying down some sign and they're getting frustrated, that tiny little funnel there, that could be a situation where when they move through there, they're laying down sign, and it's so small that would make sense. One that's wider over here, I'd probably expect to find some rubs through there too, but I'm going to have to work harder to find them because it's a little bit wider of an area. So this is why e-scouting can be so important, and this is why topography is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Because even without the satellite imagery, I'm just going to take that away for just a second, if it wants to work. I have it on hybrid. Oh, yeah, it's just going slow. I'll show you what it looks like without.
You might have just selected topo, didn't you?
I did, yeah. There.
No, without the satellite.
Without the satellite, yep. So this is that same area.
Ooh.
And you can see almost it's more defined now because you're not looking at the actual satellite imagery. This is still, you can see that stream bed come through there, but this is all just topography, right? So, talking about where I'd go to look for those pinch points, yeah, that's great. There's also some stuff that I'm seeing now that's a little bit more defined that I would think there could be good buck bedding up high. So during the day, like you said, and going back to this, you can see on the topography pretty well, and all that stuff that I kind of showed with the cuts, you wouldn't know about that, but you can still see the topography pretty well and understand kind of what's going on down there. But having
topography is a little bit more important than
I think so. Some people are definitely going to disagree with me on that, but that's okay. So going back, that's why I use hybrid, because I do like the best of both worlds on it. So I'm going to zoom in again. In these low points, the other thing that with this we've established is food, there's water, there's cover through there. That also spells does to me. That's really good cover to raise fawns in. There's everything you need in a very small little area, and that's where the does are going to stay. The does don't roam like bucks do. They stay put for the most part. So where would if we're going to establish that this low area holds a bunch of does and maybe the occasional buck that wants to bed down on that thick stuff, where are the bucks going to be bedding? So I'm looking at this at 16,000 feet up here. What I like to look for is the high point, because like we talked about down at Huntstock, they go down at night and they go up during the day. If you come across a track and it was made in the morning and it's going up, more than likely you follow that and you'll find where that buck bedded down. So they like, at least from what I've found, they like benches. Okay, what they like to do is they like to find some spot where they can lay down on flat ground, see downhill, and put their back up against something and be able to smell what's coming up. They like to still scent check their does from up high. So if they can get up high and be able to smell the does from down below and be able to have that security of being up high and watching their backtrack from an uphill vantage point, they like that, but they like that comfortability of being up high. So I want to see, you see how there's this little blip that comes off here? That intrigues me a little bit as being a buck bedding area, because it's up high. It's this nice little bench. It's on the eastern side, which also may have cover from the wind, depending on how this is exactly laid out. That eastern side could have that wind cover, which would make it even more comfortable. If he wants to bed down right on like this corner of it, it's the south-facing side of that easterly bench. There could be some sunlight for him to kind of soak up in the wintertime. We're talking hunting season, so, and if we're talking about the rut, when there might be snow on the ground and everything like that, you got to think about warmth, right?
Right.
If you want to talk early season, sometimes I find them on the north sides because that's the cooler side. When we're talking like bow season and stuff like that, but they still like these benches. So when I find these benches like that, I like to go up and I like to explore them. You see this one over here, this is down at topping out at 1200, 1100. So it's kind of this plateau that I would check out too, but I'm not at, I like it being a little higher up than that. But that's a nice plateau that's a little bit raised over some area over here that we haven't really checked out yet, so we don't really know what's over here.
It's also got a pretty gradual rate of rise.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not super steep.
Okay, so we have this, see all this? This looks like cutting to me. All these lines. It all looks like cutting.
Right in there looks pretty swampy.
It could be, yep. And you see how it looks like there's cuts right in along the swamp. Again, that could be the exact same thing where you have that cover and food, water, everything you need. And then if these does are hanging out down here, then you've got this little bench above it that the bucks could kind of go up on. I would check that out. And I would check like this one out. See how 1400, how it's up there. It's on the south side of it. If he wants to tuck himself away over here on the southeast side, this little corner right here, that might be nice and warm depending on how it is. If there's a rock there that he can put his back against, I think he'd be pretty happy with that. And look at where that is too. That's right near that funnel that I was talking about. So it wouldn't surprise me if somewhere in here you find a game trail. You might find some rubs. If he's right here, he might stand up. He might rub a little bit while he's bedded down in there. You might find that kind of stuff. You might find a bedroom right on this little blip here. So again, those finger ridges like that come out intrigue me a lot for bedding areas. Again, I have no idea. I've never been here before, so there could be nothing on that.
Right.
But absolutely, if I'm going in there to scout, I want to put a pin there. So then that way, when I'm trumping through the woods, I can pull my phone out, I can check that pin, and I can make sure I go check that out. Those are areas that I would check out before I check out anything else. So that's the basic way. So then, now that I've established some area that I want to check out, so we're going to say this hill here, and then in order to check out these areas, instead of going through the whole thing, I might just skirt the whole bottom of this as much as possible. Or if I'm like over on this swamp, again, I might just skirt that whole edge of that swamp. And I might just find the game trails coming in and out of those areas. If I go around that whole base of that hill, I might find where the game trails are going up it, and that might actually lead me to, oh, his bed wasn't where I thought it was. It's going to be over here now or something.
Cool.
That's why that can lead to that boots on the ground stuff, and that's why I think boots on the ground is so important, right? So this is Maine, and I can't show you leaf-off imagery because it's not available in Maine yet. But if I were to, the leaf-off imagery can help you with two things. One, if there's a cut that's really overgrown, you may not be able to see it with this regular satellite imagery. So if you do leaf-off imagery, all of a sudden more defined lines could pop up. The other thing is, what doesn't lose their leaves in the wintertime?
Evergreens.
Exactly. So you're actually going to be able to figure out exactly which are evergreens and which are deciduous trees. Why is that important? Because evergreens provide a lot of thermal cover in the wintertime. So when those deciduous trees lose their leaves, a lot of times you'll find evergreens like hemlocks and stuff like that, the spruce, if they're thick, that's bedding cover. That's really good areas to remember to slow down when you're coming up on, because something could be bedded in there. So when you're e-scouting, looking for those things is really important. Another thing is, if you're trying to figure out, again, creatures of edge, how they're moving through an area, they may walk right along that hardwood softwood line.
Gotcha.
I see that a lot too. And a lot of the time, especially with the cutting we have up here in the Northeast, there's sometimes really, really defined lines, even natural, even without cutting, there's some really defined lines between hardwood and softwood. If you drive through, Franconia Notch or anywhere, I think probably one of the best views that you have of it is when you are heading northbound and you come out of Franconia Notch and you look off to the left and you can see the whole landscape. If you look through that in the wintertime, you can just see what I'm talking about.
Patches.
Exactly. Patches everywhere. You see the green patches, and then there's just the gray, right? And when you can see that, that's what I'm looking for on a map, too, because that's going to help me determine if I see on the edge of a south-facing ridge, I see some defined lines between a softwood and a hardwood, area, I'm going to look right in there because they have cover, and more than likely in those hardwoods, there's probably some food, maybe some oak, something like that, and you can get up there and try to figure out, maybe it's beech, maybe it's oak. There's got to be a spot where there's a food source for them, and there's probably going to be activity there. So that's why the leaf off imagery I use a lot for purposes like that. The other thing that you can use with, I don't know if Maine has it established with Elite, is how do I get to it? I'm so used to using this on my phone versus on the computer. Actually, I think it's in here. The recent imagery is a way that you what they do is within 2 weeks they take a lot lower definition pictures of everywhere. So if you click on the recent imagery and you have it go to that, you'll see it's a lot more fuzzy. It'll load here. You see how that's a lot more fuzzy? You can't really pick it up, but you can see clearly defined features in there, and it's all within 2 weeks. But it's just not that really crisp image you get with the old stuff, right? So if all of a sudden you pop on the recent imagery, and you could see just this brand new cut hanging out there that's not on the old one, but you see this brown patch or something like that, and you're like, what's that? Well, you figure out that's a cut. So recent imagery, that's another one that I use to get there. Other things that I can just tell you about with it, you see how much more defined that is? Yeah.
Yeah.
Other things you can use on it is is it under Elite Tools? Maybe? No. Anyway, there's a way that you can, it'll show you what type of trees are where based off of their satellites picking up what type of trees they are. So if you're looking for thermal cover, you can actually overlay. It comes in as like purple. You can do blue for wetlands. Then there's like red for oaks. All that kind of stuff. You can overlay that onto it. So there's some advantages to having Elite, but I would say the biggest one that I like is the leaf off imagery. Yeah. That really helps me decide a lot of what I'm going to do. So that's just like a really brief introduction. So then where I go from here, it's a brief, like I was saying, it's a brief introduction into this stuff. I don't want to go too crazy on this right now, because I could go into it for hours as to where I go from here once I get a route established. Then I start to utilize it, playing off of each other with me having boots on the ground. But obviously the last thing that I would do just for this basic thing is try to establish my access, right? So, I mean, obviously we can see routes, this is a road here. I don't know, it's Maine, so these could be these logging roads that you could drive right out into these areas. Some of them you do, some of them have gates. You don't really know until you get there, honestly. For hunting it, say I get out there and I find that we're in rifle season or muzzleloader season or something, so we're talking that November time where the rut's happening and all that. Say they're down in here, we know the does are down there, they're scent checking them and everything like that. So we have the west side over here, east side over here. Which way does the wind typically blow? West to east, right? So I may want to find a way to access it from the east side.
Right.
Maybe once we get down in here, the wind starts to swirl. Maybe it doesn't, but we pay attention to that. I try to access it maybe from the east side. If I don't have snow, I'd especially do that. Because if I don't have the ability to track them, or if this is early season, like bow season, and I want to get in there and get in my saddle and do some bow hunting, I would definitely come from that downwind side so that I don't just blow my scent all over that whole area.
Right.
And obviously, depending on what game trails I'd find, that's how I would set up my saddle and everything like that. It really would depend on the specifics of it. I could give you a hypothetical situation where if we have a game trail coming from this swamp that goes into this food source area, and then we have this what looks like a road that kind of goes across here. I don't want to get too close to their bedding area down here. I want to be close enough to it where once they come out of their bedding and into the food, I'm right there.
Right.
Because those big mature bucks are probably going to wait until just after dark or just before dark. So I would want to figure out exactly how that wind blows and find a good tree maybe on this corner within 30 yards of that game trail, a little bit into that food source if I can get in and out of there quietly, and let my wind blow off this way and not down into where I think they are. And then when they walk up that game trail, hopefully be right within 30 yards of where they are. You know, that's super basic, but that's the kind of kind of thought process that you should start to get in your brain so that you can start to then build off of that kind of foundation. There's so many more complex things that you could work through on that, but that's the basis, really foundation that you kind of want to start thinking of, right?
Okay.
If I'm doing this during rifle season and I want to walk in there and we don't have snow, then I might just start to still hunt from anywhere along in here and just try to find a spot where I'm not backlit, meaning I have some good cover on my back. My outline isn't very apparent, and I can walk slowly along that. And when I talk about still hunting, I don't mean going for a walk in the woods. I mean, like, you literally take 2-3 steps and you wait 10 minutes. And you go 2-3 steps and you wait another 10-15 minutes. And you're working at that pace. So you are practically sitting, but you are just slowly moving forward, right? So, and you're just constantly scanning a whole area. And if you want to get right in on them on their beds, that's, in my opinion, that's a great way to do it, is still hunt your way into it. If you can be super quiet, pay attention to your footfalls, and just keep as silent as you can and keep scanning, and just your eyes open for the littlest bit of movement, and be ready, because you may sneak up on them, especially if you are downwind from them. Oh my God, you could absolutely sneak right up on them if you do it right, and all of a sudden they're going to bound away from you, and you need to take a running shot. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
What questions? You've been asking some along the way.
Yeah, no. It's going to sound... I've followed you guys long enough to not really have many. For me, this is straightforward. Like, there's not much complexity to what we're showing right now.
Yeah.
I think it's a great tool. Absolutely. Especially being able to see where you're going to be walking into.
Yeah. So if I, you want to go out and do something on your own, and you've got this idea of, like you said, for example, you talk about your buddy Steve that lives down in the southern part of the state, right? Yep. I just met him down in Huntstock.
Yeah.
You guys want to start doing something together, say, and he's never hunted a patch of woods, and it's down by him, and you've never been there. This is the kind of stuff that I would start to look through.
Yep.
I happened to find this really great spot with all these cuts. If you don't have cuts, you still work for those water sources. Work through those the lowlands in between high points, those saddles, right? Those are big. And then get boots on the ground and start figuring out what types of trees are where are their food sources, all those kinds of things, and that's how you do it. So again, e-scouting is just the first small portion of a long-term project that you have. That spot that I went out to and I grabbed that camera from, I started trying to figure out 3 years ago, and I'm still got so many questions about it. And I kind of break off a chunk every season that puts a new little thing in my head, which makes me want to put a camera somewhere else and everything like that. Just dawned on me something else I want to say is, do you know when the best time to lay boots on the ground is to scout?
I'd probably say mid-morning.
Okay.
I'd say that because that's when I would want to do it, because I'm not getting up early.
No. That's good that you said that. Let me rephrase it. What time of year is the best time to scout?
Well, new areas?
Yeah, brand new areas. You've never been there before.
Would be the furthest thing from the start of the season.
I like that. Absolutely. When I go out shed hunting in January, February, March, and April leading up to turkey season, I am 50-50 scouting and shed hunting at the same time. And when I found that, it just reminded me, because that camera that I just checked yesterday, I found the spot to put that camera while I was shed hunting, because I found sign up there. It looked like a spot where there was a lot of paths of least resistance. So there's a ridge above it, there's a swamp down below it, and it's this bench. Literally what we were just talking about, right? And there are 3 or 4 different funnels. One is kind of like a Y, so you could call it 4 or 3, right? So we'll say 3 funnels coming off this ridge from the other side of it that all lead right to this little point.
Gotcha.
And it's on this bench, and there's so much cover, and it looks just like a golden little area. So I was like, I want to stick a camera up here, because I've been trying to figure out this area for a long time, and see what pops through.
Yeah. And
as I posted on Facebook, there was a pretty darn nice buck that's making his bed Dubai time up there. So it's just sometimes it's a little bit of luck plays a role in it too.
Yep.
But that type of e-scouting can just give you that little bit of leg up to not have to canvas the whole entire area, and kind of be able to hone in on little areas to check first before you start expanding out from there. And again, get your boots on the ground and prove yourself wrong. I've done it so many times where I've e-scouted. I've said, yep, that looks like a great area. I lay boots on the ground and I go, nope, there's nothing here. There probably isn't ever something here, and I need to reassess and do something different. So that's my process.
Cool.
Yeah.
No, I love it. It's complicated, but it's like the simplest form of complication.
Sure.
Like there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of things you're looking for, but at the end of the day, it's common sense. Like it's like, yeah, of course that makes sense that you'd look for that.
Right. In a way it's common sense, and in a way it's not. But like really honestly, what will put it all together is when you see it for yourself on the ground, because then even now, like I'm looking at this satellite imagery of stuff that I've never been there before, I can kind of imagine what it looks like on the ground there, because I've been in similar areas to this, and I've seen what they look like on a satellite image before, so I can kind of have a rough idea what I'm dealing with.
Right.
And so once you start putting those two together, you're going to start rocking and rolling pretty fast with scouting.
Nice.
Those cuts too, those would be places that I would go look for sheds, because once, especially the south-facing ones, when it starts to get warm, so when you're in those cold months and they're looking for a little bit of warmth, and some of those areas may still have some browse for them to feed on, they're going to be, more than likely, they're going to be in there. So those would be also good spots to look for sheds. So.
Nice. Cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah. No. Any
hugely helpful.
Yeah. Anything I can do, and then maybe what we'll do coming up sometime soon is we'll e-scout an area together, and then we'll go put some boots on the ground there and try to go full circle on a situation.
Yep. So. No, love it.
Cool. Well, I hope everybody watching this learned a little something, or if you want to comment on this video and let me know tips, tricks, things that I didn't cover that you think are important, good chance I'm going to learn something too, because I'm constantly learning every
Always
day.
Learning.
So I'm very happy when people can throw some knowledge my way too. So feel free to do that. Otherwise,
progress, not perfection.
That's it. You'll never be perfect, and you'll always be progressing as long as you're willing to learn. So
that's it. Awesome.
But yeah, no, I appreciate everybody listening to this. Again, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I recommend going to the YouTube channel and checking out the visuals of this, because you'll be able to put the words together a lot more with the visuals.
Make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But appreciate you sticking through.
Yeah. So that's this episode. It's kind of a quick one, but well, actually no, we've been going for about 45 minutes. Yeah. So that's a perfect one. So cool, guys. Well, we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening.
Have a good one. Good night.